Welcome to this special program regarding the inauguration of Donald Trump as 47th President of the United States, promising a new golden age, drilling oil for oil everywhere, to take back the Panama Canal and the renaming of the Gulf of Mexico, as well as a US flag being put on the planet Mars. Donald Trump sworn in as the 47th President of the United States. He spoke to restate his America First mantra, starting with the words, "The golden age of America starts now." Then he declared a national emergency at the southern border and remain in Mexico policy to be reinforced, he said, by US troops. This, it seems, is his immigration policy launch. He's also ended legal entry for 1 million migrants with online appointments. On the economy, Trump's words, drill, baby, drill, his answer to what he calls a national energy emergency. He's promising fair, equal and impartial justice. His promise on the law claims that he has been a victim of injustice in the wake of his legal convictions. The US will only recognize 2 genders, he says, male and female. This will be a change Trump enshrines later in law. All this proclaimed by Trump on his order queue at the lectern inside the Capitol. The ceremony, of course, moved from its usual outdoor location because of the extreme cold weather currently hitting Washington, D.C. A very wise move indeed, as our correspondents who are outdoors will tell us later. The same place, of course, 4 years ago, was stormed by supporters of Trump on his provocation, who refused to accept that he'd lost the 2020 election. In November, Trump won the 2024 election, beating the Democrat Kamala Harris by a margin of 312 votes to 226 in the Electoral College, and by a much narrower margin of 49.9% to 48.4% in what is referred to as the popular vote. The upshot sees Trump hold a majority in both houses of Congress and a majority on the Supreme Court. So does this mean that nothing now can stand in the way of Donald Trump and his America First agenda? We'll be discussing this and all the issues with our guests. Here in the studio, in the first hour of the program, we're joined by Nita Wiggins, lecturer at Sciences Po and author of the book Civil Rights Baby, her story of race, sports and breaking barriers in American journalism. Nita, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Mark.
On the other side of the studio, but not necessarily against, it's not like that, it's not that kind of program. Fred Hoffman of Democrats Abroad. Fred, great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you.
On the other side, and perhaps these two might disagree, but I'm sure they'll disagree in a very friendly way. John Lowe of Republicans Overseas. Thank you, sir, for being with us.
Thank you.
Last but not least by any stretch of the imagination, Ketevan Gorgeous-Stani, our former Washington correspondent. She's been following the whole story for us, well, basically from the midterms onwards to beyond, and now here, watching everything as it unfolds. Ketevan is working her socks off. But out in the freezing weather in Washington, we have Fraser Jackson, our Washington correspondent. Fraser, great to see you. Fraser Jackson there, as you can see, with the Capitol behind him. Fraser, tell us about your day. Tell us about what's been happening. Give us your sense of the occasion.
It's been an interesting day, really. We've seen, a lot of ceremony, a lot of tradition almost, and some slight departures from tradition as well. It's kind of started earlier. We saw the Bidens welcoming the Trumps to the White House. They had a tea together. We know that there's one unofficial tradition that Joe Biden has engaged in this time round, which is leaving a presidential letter on the Resolute desk in the Oval Office for Donald Trump, something that Donald Trump did do for Joe Biden during the transition 4 years ago, albeit he didn't attend the inauguration. And of course, Obama did it in turn for Trump back in 2017. We then saw, a very kind of poignant and symbolic transfer of power in the Capitol. And then that was kind of followed by a very kind of dark almost speech by Donald Trump, especially the speech that he gave to his supporters in the overflow room next to the rotunda of the Capitol. A real kind of departure from those kind of unifying speeches that we are used to hearing in this kind of ceremony. Of course, Donald Trump famously gave his speech about American carnage when he first took office 8 years ago, and it was a similar vein, but almost darker in some ways. A really seemingly vindicated Donald Trump, who now knows where all the buttons are. He knows how this office runs, and he's going to be hitting the ground running, as we'll be exploring with those executive orders.
Indeed, those executive orders to come. Fraser Jackson for now. Thank you very much indeed. Fraser there in the cold in Washington. Just, Fraser, before we leave you, what is the temperature right now? Is it -11 or something like that?
It's not as cold as that. Honestly, Mark, to you, I will say it's actually much warmer than we were anticipating. We were expecting about -12. My app at the moment says -3, feels like -9. I don't know whether it's just because I have about 15 different layers on, but honestly, with the sun, it doesn't feel that bad. I've spoken to a couple of journalists and a couple of people who are the Donald Trump supporters who are around, who actually say that if the ceremony was like this, then they think they could have been held outside itself. Donald Trump and Mike Johnson have both said that it's freezing, have continued to say that it's too cold to hold outside. But honestly, having been outside for the last 3 or 4 hours, it doesn't feel as that cold to me.
All but job, Fraser. Thank you very much indeed. We've got also Douglas Herbert and Catherine Rose-Trent in the environs, as we say. We'll be joining them as we go through the programme. Fraser, stand by and keep yourself connected. We'll be coming to you as soon as we possibly can. I think all in all, the right decision was made to move the proceedings indoors. Definitely.
Who was the president who died shortly after having suffered through a very cold inauguration?
William Henry Harrison.
Thank you very much.
Okay, sure.
I thought it was Ted.
But we did have a president die, so
It was the right move, the right move.
It was.
John,
Yes.
can I start with you?
go ahead.
Can I just ask you before we begin the whole process, are you a MAGA Republican or an old school Republican or what? Where do you stand in the Republican Party?
I'm a Republican. I think there's a lot of good about the MAGA Republicans. I'm a little skeptical about some things. And actually, one thing I would have to say that is not coming out with the executive orders, the 200 or so that are coming out, and I think I just read it before coming over here, is that as opposed to coming off with a whole new slew of tariffs, the operative word is there's going to be a study as to what might be the most appropriate tariff. So, in other words, Trump is now moving from the pre-governing stage into the governing stage. And I think, at least in this respect, I'm seeing a bit of probably reasoning and thinking. And to me, that's a good thing.
John, thank you. Can I bring in Fred just to get his
go right
initial
ahead.
comment on that one? Because it strikes me that perhaps you might disagree, Fred.
Déjà, je ne sais pas si c'était une bonne idée de...
Can we try these?
Sorry. Can't believe I just said that.
This is what happens
If
when you
you
look
like,
at
I'll
an
speak with
international
a
channel and
French
you go
accent
from
from
channel to channel, and there you go.
That's too funny.
Fred Hoffman,
So I'll start again. That's very
Democrats
funny.
abroad, in English.
I don't know
Here we
that
go.
it was a good idea to move the... I'm just kidding, to move the ceremony inside. No, but I find it interesting, in all honesty. I found it very dark and very somber and very negative. And one thing that John just said is, to me, it's not moving from pre-governing to governing, it's lying. He lied during his campaign. He said he was going to put 25% tariffs. He said he was going to decrease the price of groceries and the price of gas. Now he's saying, oh, but we're not sure that we can actually decrease the price of eggs, especially there's now the bird flu. But to me, it's not that. It's, first of all, a lot of promises. So let's follow those, not just the next couple of days, but long term.
Okay, quickly, let's go back to Washington with Douglas Herbert, our international affairs commentator, is standing in the cold. Doug, we've come to you so you can get back in the warm. Give us your sense of what you've been hearing, what you've been seeing. We've obviously got Donald Trump now coming into a position where perhaps he has the power to do almost everything he wants.
Yeah, he has a power, Mark, and he's also, perhaps more significantly, he seems to feel validated. He's talked a lot about the mandate he has from the American people. He sees himself as now having, if anything, even more legitimacy and even more of a blank check, if you will, to push his agenda, which is now, let's make no bones about it, an agenda which is not going to face pushback or resistance, anything on a par with what we saw in his first term, when there were still people around him in his circle, both his inner circle, but his not inner circle, who would say, Mr. President, you might want to reconsider that, or Mr. President, the reality of this is that he doesn't have those voices anymore. This is a man, I've said, is now in full stride, a full sense of his own self-conviction and his own sense of validation. What I heard in this speech was strikingly similar to what I heard when I was standing on a rooftop not far from here 8 years ago during his first inaugural address, the famous American Carnage address. Now, at that time, you know, everyone was talking about how dark and sinister and dystopian it is, how much of a break it was from the precedent of inaugural speeches where you're supposed to, or at least the precedent has been, you give some sort of optimistic, some sort of hopeful message. You hit lofty themes. That is at least the tradition. He broke from that then, and he broke from that again today. You know, it's interesting because in the moments before he stepped up to the podium to give this address, this what I've been calling American Carnage Redux. Before that, Amy Klobuchar, who was a Democrat, who had been the head of the one of the heads of the inaugural committee, spoke in the Capitol Rotunda, right in front of Trump, about the need for a generosity of spirit in a very polarized and divided America, the need to be civil among people. And you might have thought that if anything was going to sink in with that message, there might have been some form of outreach, some form of humility, some form of trying to strike a tone of conciliation in this speech. There was not only no conciliation in this address, and I'm not trying to be overly pessimistic about it or be hyperbolic in saying how dark it was, but there was also a savage targeting, if you will, of his opponents. We were speaking this morning before he made the address about the fact that those who have been dared to be critical of Trump, to say a dissenting word about his policies or his administration or the people around him, they are going to be in the crosshairs potentially of this new administration, literally in the judicial crosshairs. We saw no sign today, just the opposite, that those people are going to be cut a break. In fact, after the inaugural address, Mark, in the more so-called informal comments that he made in the Capitol Rotunda to his supporters, so-called private off-the-cuff comments, he really laying into those most prominent critics of his and insinuating that they really are next in the line of rhetorical fire here. Liz Cheney calling her a crying lunatic. Mark Milley, former Joint Chiefs of Staff. These are people who were by name targeted by Trump in these comments. So if these people went in saying, you know, these people who say, watch what Trump does, not what he says. Don't exaggerate. The man isn't going to do half of his agenda. I would say that anyone who put hope in that, put stock in that, watch what he does, not what he says, I'd still say what he said today was rather chilling, especially if you're someone, whether it be a journalist, an activist, a member of a human rights group, a member of a government agency that's ever said a cross word about Donald Trump. Today, in Donald Trump's America, you are not just potentially, but by Trump's own definition and own statements today, you are in the crosshairs. You better watch out.
Dr. Serbert, our international affairs commentator in Washington, in the cold. Thank you, sir, for that first thought on what's been said at the inauguration. The words of Donald Trump, Doug being finding it very bleak and pessimistic. Doug now going to warm himself up before his next stint with us in around about an hour's time. Let's get back to our guests here in the studio. And let me remind you who we have. Nita Wiggins, lecturer at Sciences Po, author of the book Civil Rights Baby, her story of race, sports and breaking barriers in American journalism. Fred Hoffman from Democrats Abroad, John Lowe from Republicans Overseas, Kedan Gorgistani, our former Washington correspondent, who's been following the whole story for us. Kedan working her socks off as always. I'm sorry to have cut you off there because we need to get our correspondents on so they could get warm again. They've had a really tough day. Nita, can I bring you in to get your first thoughts?
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you that in 2009, I was at the first Obama inauguration outside, and it was -2 degrees Celsius. So I understand getting the correspondents on so they can warm up.
As you're speaking, we're seeing Donald Trump about to sign an executive order. Please continue, Nita.
Okay. Well, let me start with this. For the third time in 40 years, the U.S. presidential inauguration day is the same day as the Dr. Martin Luther King federal holiday. And so part of the American population was also watching the beloved community and hearing words that were not alarming, but hearing words that are boosting people and preparing people for whatever we need to do as a country to live together and to work together and have human rights respected. And the daughter of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and Coretta Scott King, of course, Bernice King, she said today, quoting her father, "What affects one directly affects all indirectly." And so yes, I heard words that were alarming to me, nothing specifically targeting me, but that means that it all targets me because when my fellow citizens are in the crosshairs or facing danger because of policies or policing or whatever that might be, that expands beyond the people who are name-checked. as I've heard people tonight mentioning, that the new president name-checked people, and that makes more people vulnerable beyond those people who are specifically called out.
I'm going to load this question, and people say I shouldn't, but I'm going to load this question. When you see the acronym MAGA, do you think Make America Great Again, or is it really behind that, Make America White Again?
I think it is an acronym that promotes white supremacy, because to go back to a previous time when I was born into a country in which I didn't have the right to vote, being born in 1964. And so I didn't have full citizenship rights written into law upon my birth. Neither did Kamala Harris, by the way. And so Make America Great Again goes back to a time when there were lesser opportunities. The Fair Housing Act had not been passed. The Voting Rights Act had not been passed. Women didn't have the right to do what they wanted to do with their bodies. And so making America great again doesn't mean that people who look the way I look necessarily had a great opportunity or equal opportunity. People survived and thrived and succeeded, of course, but why do we have to keep putting up those obstacles to some people? Why do some people from their communities, and it could be any number of communities, why do those people have to fight more to live with full humanity?
John Lowe, can I bring you in on that one?
Yes,
Republicans overseas. Go
I
ahead,
have
sir.
to say I am in total disagreement with what Nita is saying. You know, I think Make America Great Again is to make America a great place. We've suffered through 4 years, very tough years under Joe Biden, high inflation, completely out of control southern border, actually all borders. We have lots of conflict going on around the world. What Joe Biden did, pulling out of Afghanistan, basically opened up the barriers to what happened in the Middle East, in Ukraine. We have to really get back to making America strong again. We have to bolster the defense. We have to bolster the economy. We have to pay attention to energy. And we do have to make sure that our immigration laws are respected and adhered to. And this is what Donald Trump is going to be doing as he signs his first executive orders. He is paying attention to what's going on immigration. He is strengthening our controls, and he is basically reestablishing law and order in the United States.
Before I let Fred in, can I just ask you, John, do you recognize that people see when Donald Trump talks about, white nationalism, when he talks about making America
Well,
great,
he has not used the. He has not. I'm going to push back on that.
Please do.
He has not used the word white nationalism. What he did say last night is he said we're going to be moving away from diversity, equity, and inclusion. He said we're going to move towards a country where meritocracy matters again. And that's something that it's not been talked about for many, many years. And I think when he is talking about making these changes, where he is really going to be making these changes is in the administration, in the government, the governing bodies of the United States.
So meritocracy, this is the man who, when Ron DeSantis said he needed someone to replace Marco Rubio as senator, he recommended immediately his daughter-in-law. People might see that as basically sycophancy or nepotism rather than meritocracy. Would you agree?
No, I wouldn't agree.
Okay.
Because the country is too big to pay attention. I mean, there will always be some but frankly, it's happened throughout the history. I mean, Joe Biden put all his buddies into place. The ambassador in Italy was a former friend of his from Delaware. I mean, it's all over the place. So
I hear what you're saying completely. Fred?
Wow, I don't even know where to start. First of all, I just wanted to go back. You look beautiful, by the way, because you said something about the way that I look, and I think you look beautiful.
Thank you so much.
He did mention Martin Luther King in his speech, and I actually was annoyed with what he said, because he said, we will make that dream a reality. And that to me is like the farthest from my reality, and I think the reality of a lot of people, because he does not have the same dream that Martin Luther King had. That's the first thing I want to say. I want to remind people that our new president is a convicted felon, and he is a sexual predator, and he is a fraudster, and he continues to lie. So
this isn't
it's
you saying
very
this,
hard
this is law
for me.
saying this, isn't it?
So
I'm just clarifying
this is
for people
law,
who maybe
yes.
maybe don't, haven't been following it, 'cause
so-
some people perhaps haven't. This is law saying
And the
this,
other
not you.
thing, which has been proven over years, and not just the last 4 years, is how many during his administration and during the last 4 years, how many times he lied. So how are we supposed to believe anything he has to say? And that is really what I feel. Because already he's going back on things. If you listen to some of the speech, every once in a while when he was actually on teleprompter, it sounded like he was trying to be a little bit like, I want to unify. Then he goes off teleprompter. He was in campaign mode. All the things about making America great again, but then excluding people. Force with the military to get people out of the country. We saw what happened the last time when he separated families, put people in cages. I mean, Obama, there was a lot of people out of the
You know
States
very well,
deported.
Fred, that started with the Obama administration.
But not in, it's the way it was done.
It did start with the Obama
And I was just going to say, but there were how many millions of people that Obama had leave the country? It was the way it was done also. And now it's very threatening what we're hearing, especially this week coming up, supposedly in Chicago, that they're going to, who's going to be? Is it going to be ICE, et cetera? Is it going to be the military? It's very threatening. It's very negative, and it's hard to believe.
Kevin Gurjanati is itching to get in, but first, let's take a look at a report on Donald Trump, on the character that some people say, given what Fred has just been talking about, perhaps isn't the right kind of person to be leading the United States. And clearly, John Loeb would disagree. Let's take a look at our report.
In one of his final tirades on the campaign trail, Donald Trump lashed out at his adversary, Kamala Harris.
We can't stand you. You're a shit vice president. The worst. You're the worst vice president. Kamala, you're fired. Get the hell out of here. You're fired.
More radical than ever, the culmination of a character Trump has been building his entire life. Donald John Trump was born into great wealth. His father, Fred Trump, a real estate baron who had built an empire on federally subsidized housing. Young Donald would take advantage of the privilege throughout his youth.
Going into adulthood, money was still handled by his father. His father worked to get him out of the draft to go to Vietnam. And so we see someone who has lived in a bubble in which responsibility and consequences just never existed.
Fresh MBA in hand, young Trump joined his father's real estate empire. But the son had new ideas to expand the business. Hotels, casinos, an airline, book deals.
He fascinates me. And as a curiosity seeker, I wanted to say that I saw him so I can tell the people of Wisconsin that I saw Donald Trump in person.
Between ambition and delusions of grandeur, he forged a reputation as a brash business genius, one that would eventually see him cast as the ultimate mogul in his own reality TV show.
You're fired.
But the facade masked a litany of failures. His Atlantic City casinos went through multiple bankruptcies, his Trump University accused of defrauding its students. By 2016, he had been involved in more than 4,000 legal cases. The longtime owner of the Miss America pageant, Trump also gained infamy for his misogyny.
Hey, when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Whatever you want. As his third wife, Melania, recovered from giving birth, Trump allegedly cheated on her with porn star Stormy Daniels. Multiple women have accused him of sexual assault, but scandals that would have ruined the careers of others seem to have had little effect on Trump.
Donald Trump has been able to completely avoid any accountability. And his strategy for doing that has always been to never admit any fault, never admit any mistakes, and to completely always push the case against his opponents.
To his business adversaries from 2015 on, he would add political ones.
I am officially running for President of the United States.
Thus would begin a campaign without historical precedent, as Trump became the first social media candidate. In thousands of tweets, he addressed Americans directly, and it worked. One by one, he vanquished his rivals to become the Republican nominee. The Trump playbook: first, demonize the mainstream media.
CNN is terrible. Are you a CNN? You people do not cover us accurately at all.
And then his Democratic rival, Hillary Clinton.
It's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Because you'd be in jail.
A strategy that paid off as Trump was elected president on November 8, 2016.
I, Donald John Trump.
Trump entered the White House with a goal.
We will make America great again.
And a willingness to throw his weight around on the international stage.
I'm very consistent. I'm a very stable genius.
With America First, Trump took a hard line with both European allies and arch-rival China, launching a multi-front trade war. But he was notably mild with the U.S.'s traditional adversaries, like Vladimir Putin's Russia.
But I think we will end up having an extraordinary relationship.
And Kim Jong-un's North Korea, where Trump made a historic visit.
Big moment. Big progress.
But trouble would eventually catch up to the president. In 2019, he was accused of pressuring Ukraine's president to launch an investigation into the son of his political rival, Joe Biden. The House of Representatives launched impeachment proceedings, and Trump became only the third president in American history to be impeached.
The actions taken to date by the president have seriously violated the Constitution.
The Republican-led Senate, though, would acquit him. In 2020, Trump faced off against Joe Biden in a deeply polarized America.
Will you shut up, man?
Listen,
Biden was victorious, but Trump refused to let go of power, and his term ended in chaos.
We're going to walk down Pennsylvania Avenue. I love Pennsylvania Avenue. And we're going to the Capitol.
On January 6, 2021, American democracy was shaken as Trump supporters stormed the Capitol. The president impeached once again, and once again he avoided conviction. Out of office, though, his legal troubles continued to mount. Charges of classified document theft, a massive civil judgment for sexual assault, and in the Stormy Daniels affair, felony convictions on 34 counts, a first for a former U.S. president. Donald Trump was backed into a corner, but once again the Republican nominee. Indicted in 2023, his mugshot was leaked to the media. Trump's campaign repurposed it into an icon, plastering it on merchandise used to finance his new run for the White House. Never confess, never surrender, always bounce back. The mantra of Donald J. Trump.
Brian Coombe with that report. Reaction from our guests in a moment. Let's go straight to Washington. Catherine Norris-Trent is our reporter there, who's been out and about on the streets, basically taking the temperature. We know in terms of weather it's freezing cold. But tell us what's been said by the people that you've been talking to, Catherine.
Well, hi there, Mark. You're right. The temperature is below freezing. I have 6 layers of clothing on. But in terms of the people we're speaking to, they may be cold, but they are very, very excited today, the Trump supporters out on the streets. They've come to Washington from all over the U.S. and abroad occasionally. We've seen people from South Korea and Brazil who just love Donald Trump. We've spoken to people from California, from Iowa, from Texas. And basically, they just wanted to come and be in the city. Lots of them very disappointed, of course, that they couldn't get onto the mall, that the inauguration was not held outside, that they couldn't get a glimpse, however distance, of the president. Many of them were queuing up this morning to try and get into that Capital One arena, but of course, so many didn't make it. And they've been out here on the streets trying to soak up the atmosphere. And there was still quite a party atmosphere among them, I have to say, because people are so happy that he's been elected. His supporters are out. And now they're not the traditional residents of Washington, D.C., many of whom have left town, actually, for the occasion. Donald Trump only got 7% of the vote here during the election. And I've spoken to people who've come here for the first time in their lives. And there was perhaps a feeling of revenge among some of them, that they'd come back, they were happy that Donald Trump is back in the White House now. And they were saying, this is our territory, this is our capital city, and we are here and we're going to make some noise.
And what are they hoping, above all, that Donald Trump is going to do for them?
So when we've been speaking to the Trump voters, basically there are several things that come up as priorities. The economy. People telling us they do not have enough money. One young guy we spoke to this morning said he wanted to be able to put as much gas in his car and drive as much as he wanted without having to think about his wallet. Then there's immigration. You know, Trump's discourse on closing the borders, that has really hit home clearly among Trump voters. That's one of the things that comes up. Some people worked up about things like transgender issues. There are people telling us that, you know, they agree with him on that they want an end to political correctness, as they call it. But a lot of people just seem to really like him. They think of him as a strong leader, and they believe everything he says. So, you know, we've heard all kinds of things this morning from different supporters. But for him, you know, for them, Donald Trump is the man, and they don't believe any of the reporting, any of the facts against him. And if you ask them about some of the more controversial things he said, they just dismiss those out of hand. They do not care.
Catherine Doris-Trent, a reporter on the streets of Washington, speaking to supporters of Donald Trump as they've arrived for the inauguration, which of course was moved indoors because of the extreme cold. Catherine, go warm yourself up. We join you again in about an hour's time. Thank you very much indeed. Back to the studio where we have waiting Nita Wiggins, Fred Hoffman, John Lowe, Kerriman Gorgistani, who's been quiet so far, but believe me, she has many things to say. Thank you for all the work you've been doing, watching everything as it evolves. It's absolutely fantastic. I was going to ask you about the difference between working as a correspondent in Washington under the end of the Trump era and in the Biden era, but I know you've got something you want to say first. Go ahead.
I just wanted to touch up on the question of the economy and immigration, because Catherine spoke about it, but this was something in the second speech that Trump gave, where he said immigration is the priority, not inflation. This is a little bit of a flip from the campaign where, yes, immigration was a huge part of it, but the economy and ending inflation was what he said. I will end inflation on day one. That was his promise. Of course, we all know that you don't end inflation as easily as that. And you're seeing that Trump is sort of turning it a little bit to focus more on the immigration. And we'll see that most of the executive orders that he signs today are going to be focused on immigration. And he's going to focus on immigration first, because concretely, this is where you can have the first actions. We might see some of the first raids tomorrow in Chicago if the reporting is right. We might see the troops at the border tomorrow if it actually goes through. Whereas acting on bringing down the prices is going to take a little bit more time if he actually manages to do it. And one other thing I would say is that there is a core of Trump voters who very much want to see that immigration issue fixed. But there are a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump that hadn't voted for him before. A lot of people, and I was here earlier when Catherine was interviewing some other people, who the first thing that came out of their mouth, I want him to put more money in my pockets. That's what they want to see first. And we're seeing that Donald Trump is focusing a little bit more on the economy right now, because he knows, and his administration knows, that ending inflation is not going to happen on day one, and it's going to take time. And I don't think he has that much time. One guest earlier on in the day was saying he probably has a sort of honeymoon period of 8 to 9 months where he needs to do a lot, because he promised a lot. And I've been getting emails from the Trump-Vance transition team at the time throughout the day, promises made, promises kept. He made a lot of promises. He's going to be probably be looked at by the people who voted for him, waiting to see if their promises are kept.
But if at the end of the day they put their hands in their pockets and they pull them out like that, and
there's no money,
they're going to feel quite aggrieved.
Yeah, but a couple of things. First of all, curbing inflation takes time.
Exactly.
People are going to say, people have been saying, economists have been saying that the cut of 50 basis points in September by the Federal Reserve probably was an overreaction. There are going to be no cuts for the rest of this year, probably. What Donald Trump is doing, and frankly, this is where his emphasis is going to be, is on basically deregulating the regulations that Joe Biden put in to basically hamstrung the economy and slowed it down. He's going to create an economy where growth is the objective, and that is what is going to produce benefits for Americans. And that is why he will put a lot of effort into deregulation, freeing up the energy section, and actually improving our commercial relations with partners around the world. And that will entail the threat of tariffs and actually the implementation of tariffs.
Tariffs could lead to inflation, which is exactly what he's trying to
But
stop.
as I told you when I first came in here, they're not stupid. They understand that, but there are benefits that can be gained from that as well. So it will be done, and it will be done carefully.
I'm looking at tradingeconomics.com. Inflation in the US in December is 2.9%. In December 2024, 256,000 jobs were created. Yeah. Biden left Trump unemployment figures of 6%, they're down to 4.1%. So that looks as though Biden's done an okay job, in spite of course, the unhappiness of the electorate.
Frankly, on unemployment, employment, that is pretty good in the United States. The economy is not doing badly in the United States right now. Inflation is still a bit higher than it should be.
And can I let Anita then, Fred? Is that okay? I'll come back
Please
to you.
Go ahead.
Yes. Let me talk about black wealth. Because one of the pledges of the Trump-Vance administration is to reduce the administrative state and reduce federal jobs. And the federal workforce is where black families have been able to gain employment, that parents have gained employment, and then they climbed the social ladder or even climbed the economic ladder. And currently, of the federal workforce, 18% is made up of black workers, which is higher than the 13 or 14% of the black population. Also, with the federal workforce, 44% is made up of women, and women and minorities have been able to have a more meritocratic opportunity on the job and to climb into management and make more money. And so black wealth will be hampered if this administrative state and if the federal jobs are reduced, because that is where black families have been able to gain an economic footing and have more of an opportunity instead of in private practice, but in government jobs to be able to climb socially and economically.
Brad?
No, I just wanted to go back to what John said, which is good. I'm happy that you recognize that the economy is actually in a good place. And in fact, Trump is inheriting a very good economy with increased jobs, decreased inflation, decreased unemployment. So he's going to now, and in fact, there was an article the other day. Let me just finish, John. Let me just finish. There was an article the other day about the IMF saying that the United States is going to continue to overperform in the coming year. Now, you know that Trump is going to say that he did that. He's not looking at what has been done for that to take place. The other thing is in terms of wealth and in terms of the people who want to see more money in their pockets, I watched several times when they changed the location to be inside. These people who traveled from all over the United States, who paid hotel rooms, who brought their kids, for not just to see him, but it was historic. I understand that. And then they felt like we spent all this money, and a lot of them don't have this money, and now we're going to be going to be able to see him. And there was one farmer that said, you know what? When the cows need to be fed, if it's cold or not, we don't have that choice to move in. And so I think, and there was one other thing that was said today that it was definitely off teleprompter, when he was talking about the fires in California and how many homes were lost, and he was putting blame on, of course, Biden and Gavin Newsom, et cetera. And they just said, and there were even these billionaires' homes, and some of them are sitting here today with me. It's terrible that they're, so he's thinking only about the rich people that he can use and that he's surrounded with and himself, and he doesn't give a flying crap about the real American. That's my feeling.
John.
Okay, I will disagree with that basically completely. But I will also
Does he care
say,
more about rich people than poor people?
No, I think frankly, the reason Trump actually won is he won the vote of the lower middle class.
Right, because he lied to them. Right, because he lied to them. Yeah.
Let me speak, please.
Okay.
No, they remembered the 4 years of the Trump presidency, and that was an era. That was an era where the people at the bottom end of the scale, including blacks, Hispanics, lower income whites, actually did better than the rest of the company. Their wages were increasing more than the rest of the company. They remember that. And I will also say
it's not a company, it's a country.
What?
You said company. It's not a company, it's a country.
Thank you.
Is that a Freudian slip?
but
for everyone else to judge.
But I will also say he is facing some economic problems. For example, we are paying more on our debt now than we spend on national defense. With interest rates where they are, we have to be very careful.
John, what was the
government spending will have to be controlled.
What was the debt that Donald Trump left? $8 billion.
Fred, I understand the debt he left. It was increased astronomically. It was increased astronomically during the Biden administration.
But Donald Trump wants to, which is very interesting because that's where you see a little bit of the sort of divisions within the Republican Party, because we talked a lot about the Democratic big tent, but there was also a big tent for the Republicans for Donald Trump, voting for Donald Trump. And you're already seeing over the budget, the sort of fight over the budget where Donald Trump was like, get rid of the debt ceiling, get rid of all of this. And you had some very conservative fiscal Republicans who said, wait a minute, we've been saying for decades that we need to reduce debt, and you're now telling us that you want to remove the debt ceiling. So I think that's going to be interesting going forward, is to see how those two sides or different sides of the Republican Party.
You're absolutely right. There are going to be some tensions. A good example of that is the SALT deduction. There are a number of representatives and senators from the East Coast, high taxing states, who want to bring back this state and local tax deduction from your income, which was basically knocked out in the first Trump administration. They want to bring it back. And that is going to be a big bone of contention because go ahead.
Sorry, I need us itching to get in. And
go ahead.
Can I just correct myself?
Yes,
it was
Fred.
$8 trillion, not $8 billion. Debt.
I was going to say,
Excuse me.
the billion sounded
Trillion.
low, but...
Sorry.
It's trillions now, not
because I was
billions.
thinking in French.
Again, problems of working on an international scale. Fred Hoffman of the Democrats abroad. John Lowe of Republican Overseas. Ken Overgorge tonight, of course, our own star. But next is Nita Wiggins, lecturer at Sciences Po, author of the book Civil Rights Baby. Go ahead.
What I wanted to get back to was the nominees and policies, because there's a lot of conversation, sure, but there is a nominee for labor, and it's kind of funny to me that President Trump is doing something that Franklin Delano Roosevelt did with the nominee for the Labor Department. So when Frances Perkins was nominated by FDR, she was the first woman as the Labor Department secretary. And so Donald Trump has nominated a Republican woman, but this person actually has policies that are accepted by all families who want a stronger base of the union. And so the nominee is named Lori Chavez Redeemer, and she was a business owner in Oregon and was elected to the House of Representatives for one term. And she should sail through to approval simply because her platform really is to strengthen the protections of unions. And I hope at this table, anyway, there's a recognition of what union contracts can do for the pockets. I like when Mark emptied his pockets to show there was nothing there.
Sure, I had nothing.
But it is often a union position that can help a family get its footing. And I'm not talking about moving necessarily to the middle class. I'm talking about being on a lower rung economically and getting a foothold, and then with that personal work and grit climbing. And this secretary, if approved, might be someone who does work in a way that helps people of all persuasions.
OK, cards on the table. I've always been a union member and I've even led strikes. So that's me getting all that out in the open. Fred, Fred, go ahead.
No, I think that's good, and I'm glad that there's at least one nominee that is going to be helpful for the American people, as opposed to people who've been, accused of sexual, aggression and many other things illegal.
You're talking about Donald Trump there, aren't you?
I'm talking about not just him, but how about Pete Hegsworth?
Hegseth. Thank you.
Hegseth.
No,
Hegsworth.
It's good to get these things out on the table so people who don't
because
know.
a lot of his nominees are very controversial. I mean, I remember, first of all, Matt Gaetz, who, thank goodness, stepped away from the nomination because he's a sexual predator as well. You saw the report that came out. Not just sexual predator, but it's just kind of good he stepped away from government. Pam Bondi, who has been nominated, I remember years ago when she was the Attorney General of Florida. She's a big homophobe. She was against gay rights, gay marriage, making it harder for people to vote, especially black people in Florida. I mean, so if you start looking at Tulsi Gabbard, who is like a Russian asset. I mean, his nominees for
is
me,
meant to be in charge
the
of
Director of National Intelligence.
Yeah.
Which is just so absurd. You're putting, I mean, even the fact of Hegseth, to think that it would be like if you told me you did your military service and Macron said, you know what, I want you to be the Minister of Defense. I mean, that's what it's like. My sole qualification. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, these people are going to be running, ministries, if you want, departments that they're not qualified to do.
John, why does Donald Trump go for this kind of personality?
Okay, I think what you've done is you've picked Tulsi Gabbard and the Labor Secretary. I'm gonna ignore the name, but he's basically paying off some political debts with those. And I would say Robert Kennedy probably fits. Let me continue. John. I think he's picked some very good ones. I think Pam Bondi is an excellent choice. I think Pete Hegseth is an excellent choice. He'll do it. Well, let me speak, Fred. I think he will do. He's a very qualified. He's a very intelligent
to run the
person.
Defense Department.
This is the gentleman from Fox News.
You got to be.
Yes.
This is the gentleman from. But the Defense Department is in need of a complete turnaround. We have Marco Rubio moving into the Department of State.
Why is Hegseth qualified?
Because he will change the Department of State.
No,
what's Department of
those aren't
Defense.
Qualifications.
It doesn't matter.
You just said he's qualified. What are his qualifications?
He's intelligent, and he knows, and he knows what the problems are. And he did did you listen to his testimony? Did you listen to his testimony in front of the Senate?
I did.
He came off very, very well.
I listened as well, and I thought it was interesting that Senator Sheldon Whitehouse said to Mr. Hegseth, you are qualified to be the spokesperson for the Department of Defense, but not the cabinet level Secretary of Defense. And I will say that I worked at a Fox channel in Dallas, Texas for 9 years. And when Mr. Hegseth talked about the non-disclosure agreements or said that those accusations were unsigned, I know how it works with these agreements that are unsigned when a woman in particular feels that something illegal happened or definitely something incorrect. And to sign a non-disclosure agreement doesn't mean that nothing happened. And during the 5 hours that I listened to of this hearing, yes, that was repeatedly the answer. Those are rumors, those are unsigned allegations. Well, sometimes that is the way it spills out when there is a non-disclosure agreement. And that is disqualifying.
You know, one of the comments, and I think it was from the chairman of the committee that was leading the hearing for Pete Hegseth, one of his first comments was to compare Pete Hegseth to Donald Trump. And I think therein lies why he was chosen by Donald Trump. He said, you're an unconventional nominee. And maybe that is what makes you good for this job. You know who else was unconventional? The man who came down the elevator in 2015 and became the president of the United States. That was the message of the Republicans. And I believe that that is exactly why Donald Trump picked Pete Hegseth. He picked someone who had military experience, and that is he didn't just do his military service. He is actually decorated military man, which doesn't make you necessarily fit to lead a department that has 3 million people. But I'm talking about the reasons why Donald Trump picked him. He is a man of on the ground, and Pete Hegseth said it, someone with dust on his boots. He is someone who is unconventional. He is someone, and everyone knows that Donald Trump pays close attention to how good you are on TV. And Pete Hegseth, as we've talked about, was an anchor on Fox News, and you could see it in the hearing. He was good at answering questions. He was good at dodging questions. He looked good on TV, and this is what Donald Trump wants.
I feel that's who is the audience, because when I'm watching that, as an educated man, Democrat, I'm older than you, so I've been, I lived a long time in the States before coming here. I didn't think that about him. I don't see him that way.
No, but he's good for the people who don't know. For example, who know a little bit about foreign policy, when he was asked by one of the senator, can you name one of the countries that are members of the ASEAN, and he couldn't.
But that's what I mean.
That is a problem. Right. But for the general population...
But that doesn't make him qualified.
No. I'm saying
and
how
with an America First policy, and with an increasingly inward-looking government, it doesn't really matter.
It doesn't really matter.
But it
doesn't matter
he is
to
an
who.
unconventional candidate. And similar, in the same vein, I would say J.D. Vance was somewhat of an unconventional choice
as
vice president. But
I think that,
these are
in all these nominees, and I think the union leader is a very odd one, and a lot of people within the Republican Party and within the cabinet, like Elon Musk, maybe not super happy about that pick, I think.
But from what I read, that's the truth. But
the exception really are the likes of Mike Waltz, who's going to be the national security advisor, or Marco Rubio, who are people who have years and years of experience in their field, who are recognized by both the Democrats and the Republicans as people who know. Then they disagree on policy, and you could see the hearing with Marco Rubio, that it was the one hearing where it was about policy. Pete Hegseth's hearing had zero policy.
Because Rubio is one of the only people that's actually qualified. But yet I don't respect, I don't respect him either, because he criticized Trump so much years ago. They all did. They're a bunch of hypocrites. They all kissed the ring.
Isn't that a politician thing, though?
I don't think, not in this case. When you hear, we all can go back and look at the things that were said. Yes, it exists. I'm not saying that. But when you think about the terrible things that he said about, Ted Cruz's wife. I mean, it's unbelievable. They all came around. It's like they thought he was more important than their own family. It's just shocking to me. But again, John, you said something which I thought was just kind of funny, and I have to bring it up. You said he was qualified because he was intelligent. Well, I hope so, because I hope we don't have stupid people running the U.S. government.
As I was saying,
no, seriously, you did say that.
Stupid. That is an interesting thing. There was a great article in the Wall Street Journal talking about how Joe Biden was stupid when you used the definition. I think it was an Italian writer who wrote the book Cipolla, talking about the grandi stupidad. Talking about the reasons people are stupid. And he basically was saying you have very stupid people who are very smart. So stupidity, there's lots of variations of stupidity. Anyhow.
Mark, can I offer a solution?
Very quickly, because we have to go.
Very quickly.
But please, very quickly.
So $250 million was collected for the inauguration. There is a proposal called the Inaugural Fund Integrity Act, which, if signed, would limit donors to $50,000 per person, per individual. And when I see who was in the space, in the best seating, those are the tech people.
That second row, behind the children of Donald Trump.
Yes, because net neutrality and charging for fast internet is coming up, and that is part of why we do need the Inaugural Fund Integrity Act.
And what will happen with the money that wasn't spent because they didn't hold it outside? Where does that money go?
They do not currently have a mechanism to track that money. But with the proposed act, there would be
Right.
tracking of all of that money.
Let's see where that money goes.
Or
right
some
now.
of that money would be tracked.
The Speaker of the House of France Enquête is telling me to wrap up this debate right now at this point in time. Thanks to my guest, Nita Wiggins from Sciences Po and author of the book Civil Rights Baby. Thanks for being with us. Thank you to Fred Hoffman of Democrats Abroad. Fred, great to see you again. Thank you to John Lowe of Republicans Overseas. Great to meet you, sir. And thank you for answering our questions. And thanks, of course, to Kevin Gorgistani, our own star, who is staying with us throughout the time. While I'm here, she's here. Simple as that. We'll leave you now with some images of the day of the inauguration as it has unfolded. Sights and sounds, no comment.
We've been here since about 5 o'clock this morning. I'm from Middle Tennessee and just wanted to come out, support the president,